Hey guys, Ariel over here at Nyth. I wanted to talk a little bit today about something I get a lot of questions about, and that is safety and security here in my tiny house. If this is your first video, I do have hundreds of others. Check them out if you've got lots of questions. But this is my tiny house where I live off-grid, as in not connected to any public utilities, in the Western Mountains. Anyway, so a lot of you guys have been following me for quite a while, and this is something that comes up on a lot of videos. Somebody will make a comment, something to do with some of these, and some of these things don't show up in every video, so I understand people don't see them. The first one, so I just, want to cover them here and let you guys know a little bit about what I do for safety and security here at my tiny house. So the first one is, I do have a wood stove. I also have a propane stove for cooking, and so people will ask about fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, and carbon monoxide or propane detectors. Because, like I said, these don't show up in every single video that I'm filming of something else. I understand people don't see them, but I do have all of them. The smoke detector is right up in the peak of the ceiling here. Directly over my head. It does work. I do check the batteries, so I do have one. The fire extinguisher is right by the door, and it does work. There is a propane and CO2 detector plugged into the wall right over there. That also does work. And yeah, so those safety things are here even though you don't see them all the time. The next question I get is about exits, because there is only one door to this place. People discuss or mention that it's really unsafe because there's no way to get out of the loft. There is actually. I'm going to show you in this little clip here how there is an egress window in both the kitchen and in the loft. I'll illustrate a little bit how that works. You just roll the window out, pop the two little things off, and the window swings freely, and they're pretty wide. So there is actually 3 ways to get out of the house if I should ever need to. So I'm also not too worried about that. And then most of the questions I get are about the fact that I live in this particular location. Like I said, if you're new here, go check out some of my other videos, look at the spot where I live and the awesome wildlife and stuff I'm surrounded by, but I am a single woman. I do live in a pretty remote rural location, and so a lot of people are worried about my safety there. I also get asked a lot if I'm not lonely. Even though my friends don't usually show up in most of my videos, I do have friends. There are other people I do talk to and hang out with. It's not just me all the time. And if you're going to suggest that I get a cat or a dog, I've addressed those things in some of my other videos as well. Anyhow, so it is just me here, and there are a lot of really big critters around. If you've watched my wildlife videos, you'll know that I get bears, wolves, coyotes, foxes, moose, elk, deer, and all the smaller critters around my house on a very regular basis. So that is something that people do ask pretty frequently about. I don't see all the animals that come through here. I know that because, like, when there's snow on the ground, I can see their tracks, and I know they've been here, but, they are wild animals. They often move around in the dark or when nobody is looking, so you don't always see them. But I know I've had a bear here several times this summer, including, I saw 2 different bears, and I've seen tracks or evidence of some others, including one that I must have touched the outside of my door handle with something that had a smell to it, or maybe it was just curious. That guy was a kind of a teenage black bear. Anyway, he was being nosy, but he gave the door handle a little chew. So now if you go turn my doorknob, there's actually bear teeth marks in the front doorknob. But the bears do come around. I didn't see them. I'd love to get a good photo of them, but 2 different of my neighbors, which are not super close, as you probably know, but 2 different neighbors here have seen a mountain lion right beside their house. One was actually on a deck in the last week, so I know there are mountain lions around. I've heard wolves. I've seen tracks. I've never actually seen a wolf from my house, but I know they come by here because occasionally I see their tracks. And then moose and elk and those kinds of things I do see very regularly. And if you're not familiar with those, occasionally, especially moose, can be a little bit bad-tempered. I think they're cool, they're awesome animals, but they can occasionally decide to be mean, and so that is also something of a concern. So, I live in a rural, remote location. I've got lots of big wildlife around, and my most frequent question I get is, aren't you scared all the time? No, I'm not, actually. I love living here. I love the peace and quiet. I love getting to watch and photograph the wildlife. But I think partly what you're scared of has to do a lot with what you're used to. A lot of the people that are asking me that, I'm assuming, have probably never spent a lot of time in rural wilderness locations. And so it is very unfamiliar, and the unfamiliar is usually scary for all of us. I have a friend who lives here who has spent his whole life in this area, and whenever I mention that I went to see my friends in Washington, D.C. or something of the kind, he just finds that terrifying. He can't imagine being stuck in a big city with such big crowds, and what about terror attacks and all that kind of thing. So to him, that's terrifying because that's a situation he's never been in. And I think the people who are in cities looking at my situation and wondering if it's not terrifying to me, I think it's a little bit the same thing. So, no, I'm not scared all the time. I love living here, but some of these creatures certainly do require a great deal of respect. I've found when I've hosted guests here that a lot of people show up in an area like this either thinking that grizzly bears get out of bed in the morning looking for people to eat, or that they're cuddly and cute and you should feed them cookies. Now, the truth is somewhere a little bit in the middle. I kind of view bears and a lot of other big animals a little bit like I would view a semi tractor trailer if I was walking down the edge of the highway. No, I don't think most semis are out to get me, but they are an awful lot bigger and stronger and heavier and moving faster than I am, and they ought to be treated with a great deal of caution and respect because of that. And so that's kind of how I think of some of these big critters. So some of the steps I've taken so far successfully to not have negative interactions with the wildlife around here are what I wanted to show you guys next. I do also, for fun, I like to backpack and such, so I've encountered quite a few of these creatures in really wilderness situations where I'm not at my house. I have yet to ever have a serious confrontation with one. The only one that got close was I was charged by a bull moose once. I was hiking with a friend, and she and I actually accidentally ran into a whole group of moose. It was during the rut, and it was in a densely wooded area. And anyway, we got charged by a bull. We were able to circle a rock, get out of his path, and go on our way. But other than that, I really have never had a bad wildlife encounter. So some of the steps that I take to hopefully keep that way here are what I want to show you guys next. I do have lighting outside at night. I have a porch light I can turn on, so that floodlights a lot of the yard, especially when it's snowy. If you guys live in snowy areas, when the ground is white, everything is so bright at night, you can see pretty well without any light. But I also have 4 of these little motion detector solar-powered lights. They're kind of in the 4 corners of my clearing, and they don't have a big battery, but as long as it's sunny, most of the time it works. Every now and then I'll get too many cloudy days in the row and they won't hold a charge, but they will charge up during the day, and then at night, if I walk outside, if I come home in my van and hop out, if I'm inside and a fox walks by, if there's any motion like that, they will kick on. And so it helps prevent me and creatures from running into each other in the dark and not knowing the other one's there. So that is one thing I've done that works, even though I have a limited amount of power here and I don't have a ton of lighting. So, and I also have right inside the door, I've got a spotlight flashlight and a headlamp, so I've got lighting around if I need to see what's going on. I keep bear spray right inside the door. There's another one in my van. If you're not familiar with bear spray, it's basically a really high-powered mace. It'll shoot about 30 feet. It's designed for bears, but it would irritate any creature or human that has eyes and nose and such. It's got the same ingredient basically as mace that people would carry for self-protection. So anyway, I have that very handy. I have never needed to use it. I've carried it backpacking. I've never needed to use it, but I do have that in case I should have some kind of negative encounter with creatures. Then I also take steps to make sure I'm not attracting creatures right to my house, to especially to see it as a food source. I do compost things that I put in my garden, but I make sure I never put meat scraps in that, and I never leave trash outside at all. If I'm going to empty my trash can, the bag goes straight in a dumpster here that I share with some neighbors, and that's a bear-proof container. And so I'm never leaving things around that would get animals in the habit of seeing my house here as a food source. So even if they walk through, they're just doing their wildlife thing and going on their way. And so far that seemed to work pretty well. I do also have a shotgun here if I would ever need to use it. I have not, but it's something that, you know, I recommend if you're going to be a single woman living in a remote rural location. It's probably a good thing to be comfortable using if you need to. 12 gauge is a little bit, has enough of a kick that it's not fun for me to shoot. I do every now and then just to make sure I'm practiced and smooth and know what I'm doing and I'm being safe. If you're going to fire from the shoulder, you definitely get a big kick. In my clearing, I do have a hillside, as you've probably seen if you've seen other things outside over there. So if I'm firing anywhere from the house toward the hillside, I know that I've got a backstop. I'm not going to have any shot going somewhere unintended, but the noise alone should probably scare off almost anything. And it's pretty easy to for me to just fire from the hip, which solves the recoil problem. That might be something to think about if you're a single woman doing something like this. But if you're going to use a gun, make sure you know what you're doing and are going to be safe with one. I keep mine loaded with shot, which again I have never needed, but it's there. And then the last two rounds in there are actually slugs. So just in case I ever have a serious encounter, I have a bear attack or something like that happening, if frightening them off doesn't work and the noise and the shot doesn't work, there is 2 slugs in there, though I would probably be going for bear spray first, because you can put a bullet right in the heart of a bear and it's going to take longer to die than it's still going to have time before it realizes it's dead, because its metabolism is so slow, to probably mess you up pretty good. But that's some of the steps I take around here. I don't have a dog. That's partly because until very recently I've just been too busy in my life. I haven't felt like it would be fair to a dog to have one here. And it would, you know, I just don't like the idea of having a pet like a dog if you're going to be gone and just leaving it a lot. I did try to have cats, and I'll link below here if you look in the See More tab to a story of how that went. So I don't have any pets here. I do love watching the wildlife. I love the peace and quiet. If it's something you like and you are interested in, don't be scared to try it. Go camping, go backpacking, go spend a week in a cabin. You know, it's not terrifying unless, like I said, I think unless it's really unfamiliar to you, then it can be scary, like most unfamiliar things. But that's just some of the steps I take around my tiny house to both be aware of safety for things like the various detectors, exits from the house, and the general safety issues with being in a rural, remote location full of big critters. So I just wanted to give you guys an overview of that and some of the steps I've taken to try to be responsible and prepared, and maybe encourage you, if you are also single and possibly female, that you can do this kind of thing. I've been in this spot now for 3 years, and so that's what I'm going on for I haven't had a bad incident yet. I hope it stays that way. But it's definitely helpful to be familiar with the kinds of situations that could come up, especially with wildlife, and take precautions so that you don't end up in one of those negative situations to start with. Because I don't want to have something happen where one of these critters ends up dying over it. Anyway, so just my thoughts. Hopefully that's helpful if you are thinking about doing similar things. And thanks for watching. Again, if you want to check out other things about my tiny house, on the See More tab down below, I'll have links to some of that stuff. And hope you guys all have a great night.